and I'm excited to announce that I'm signing with the PFL.
I am officially a MMA fighter. I signed to the PFL.
Yeah, the UFC is facing a massive shakeup. Some of its biggest stars are walking away from Dana White and heading straight to the PFL with record-breaking contracts. And these aren't just bigger paydays, they're exposing a buried UFC clause that's quietly kept fighters locked in for years. Now, the gloves are off, the fighters are done being silenced, and they're ready to pull back the curtain on how the UFC really works. As one insider put it, Dana can shove it. Dana can kiss our ass. That's not fan talk, that's the mood spreading through locker rooms, whispered in Vegas gyms and behind closed doors. This isn't just another transfer, it's the biggest hit to Dana White's empire in over a decade. The bombshell. Some of the UFC's top-tier fighters, ex-champions, rising names, and crowd pullers have officially defected. Not to Bellator, not to ONE, but to the PFL.
I want to announce you that I'm officially partnering up with the PFL for the next step of my career.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. You read the title correctly. I've officially signed as an MMA fighter to the fastest growing sports league in the world. The PFL, baby.
Yeah, the UFC is facing a massive shakeup. Some of its biggest stars are walking away from Dana White and heading straight to the PFL with record-breaking contracts. And these aren't just bigger paydays, they're exposing a buried UFC clause that's quietly kept fighters locked in for years. Now, the gloves are off, the fighters are done being silenced, and they're ready to pull back the curtain on how the UFC really works. As one insider put it, Dana can shove it. Dana can kiss our ass. That's not fan talk, that's the mood spreading through locker rooms, whispered in Vegas gyms and behind closed doors. This isn't just another transfer, it's the biggest hit to Dana White's empire in over a decade. The bombshell. Some of the UFC's top-tier fighters, ex-champions, rising names, and crowd pullers have officially defected. Not to Bellator, not to ONE, but to the PFL.
What was the holdup with the UFC? Like, what led you to not sign?
There was a lot of frustration over the
Let's not forget who we're talking about here. Francis Ngannou, the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. The baddest man on the planet. The guy who knocked out legends with one punch. But when he dared to ask for the most basic things, healthcare, fair sponsorships, personal freedom, and the right to box, Dana White didn't negotiate. He humiliated him. Publicly, on camera. Instead of respecting a champion who fought his way from homelessness to the top of the sport, Dana turned him into a punchline, a warning to anyone else who might dare to speak up.
Francis isn't a good guy. Plays a good guy. I don't understand the language, and so he seems like he's a nice guy. He's not.
So Ngannou walked away, and the PFL didn't just sign him, they made him a partner. His deal was historic. Full freedom to box, which he used to land an $8 million payday against Tyson Fury, equity in PFL's African division, and a guaranteed $2 million purse for every MMA fight. But here's the part that shook the entire fight world. Ngannou demanded that every one of his opponents also earn at least $1 million. Think about that. The champ didn't just fight for himself, he fought for the fighters. The UFC had never done anything like it. And when reporters asked Dana White about Ngannou's move, he laughed it off, sneered, and tried to spin it like Francis had made a mistake. But deep down, everyone knew this was the beginning of the end for Dana's grip on the sport.
We'll see how this thing plays out. I don't blame Francis as much as I blame the not-so-very smart people that surround him.
But the truth, that UFC deal everyone bragged about, it was only worth around $8 million across multiple fights. Meanwhile, PFL offered Ngannou that same amount for just one. That wasn't just a signing, that was a statement. And that statement turned into a movement. By early summer, what started as a quiet ripple became a full-blown rebellion. In June, PFL began locking in deals with a wave of frustrated UFC fighters, big names whose contracts had expired or were about to. Shane Burgos said it best. I made more in one PFL fight than I did in my entire UFC career. Then came Thiago Santos, offered full medical coverage and guaranteed base pay, two things fighters had begged Dana for years to provide. And most recently, Kevin Holland, whose sudden departure shocked UFC insiders. But none of those moves shook the MMA world quite like the Nate Diaz bombshell. At UFC 279, Diaz fought out the final fight on his contract in a last-minute card shuffle. After his win, his post-fight words hit different. They sounded like a goodbye. Most fans didn't believe he'd actually walk away. But what came next proved everyone wrong.
Obviously, I don't want to ask specifics, but is this the most you've ever made in your career?
Yeah, absolutely.
Dana certainly didn't see it coming. But in July 2025, Nate Diaz stepped onto the PFL stage, lit a blunt, and declared to the world, "Ain't playing Dana's game no more. He can kiss my ass. I'm a free man now." And he meant it. His new PFL deal, worth $12 million guaranteed over 2 years, gives him everything UFC wouldn't. Full freedom to box, including a potential Jake Paul rematch, and total control over his career. For the first time, Diaz has something fighters have been chasing for decades: leverage. But Nate isn't the only one breaking free. This isn't a one-off, it's a pattern. For years, Dana White kept fighters locked down under ironclad contracts, sponsorship bans, and zero revenue sharing. Remember the Reebok deal that stripped fighters of their sponsors and side income, the public humiliation whenever someone asked for fair pay. Now, the fighters are finally fighting back, and this time, it's not in the octagon. The real war is about to start in court. A class action lawsuit is brewing that could expose the UFC's Champions Clause, the secret contract mechanism that traps champions indefinitely, even after their deals expire. One fighter's legal team claims he was deliberately benched by the UFC, kept inactive on purpose, just to extend his contract. If that's true, it's not just unethical, it's a potential violation of labor law. We'll break that case open in part 2. But here's the bottom line. The UFC house isn't on fire yet, but the smoke is rising, and for the first time in decades, Dana White can smell it. Because when you win a UFC title, you're supposed to earn freedom. But under the Champions Clause, that win can turn into a life sentence. The contract never ends, and that's why fighters are finally saying you're supposed to be free once your UFC contract ends. You've fought your fights, earned your wins, and finally made it to the top. But if you win a UFC championship before that deal expires, everything changes. Because buried deep inside that contract is the Champions Clause, a rule that lets the UFC automatically extend your deal for 3 more fights or 1 full year, whichever is longer. And here's the kicker: it doesn't matter if you were on your last fight. You win gold, and they own you all over again. According to antitrust filings in LAV, UFC, this clause gives a company the power to renew contracts without negotiation, effectively trapping champions inside the organization even after they've fulfilled every requirement. And if a fighter refuses to play ball, the UFC just refuses to book them. Time freezes. No fights, no pay, no freedom. That's exactly what Francis Ngannou says happened to him. He fought out his deal, or so he thought. But because he held the heavyweight belt, the UFC used the Champions Clause to stop him from testing free agency. As Ngannou himself put it, "I fought out my contract, but because I was champion, they wouldn't let me go." A champion, trapped by his own victory.
This was a great interview, Brad.
It was.
I have to go.
It was. I'll let you go, man. Thank you so much for the time.
Sure.
And good luck, man.
A newly unsealed deposition from the LAV UFC antitrust case has exposed just how deep this goes, revealing that at least 90 fighters have already been directly affected by the Champions Clause, and potentially thousands more over the years. But it doesn't stop there. Even fighters who never touch a championship belt are getting trapped, thanks to the UFC's other dirty little secret: the exclusive negotiation clause. According to leaked contracts submitted as evidence in the antitrust case, once a fighter completes their final bout, the UFC can trigger a matching period lasting anywhere from 30 to 90 days. During that time, fighters are barred from signing anywhere else. If another organization like PFL or ONE makes an offer, the UFC has the right to match it, and if they do, the fighter is legally forced to return. Even if that competing offer includes better healthcare, sponsorship rights, or boxing freedom, none of it matters. If the base pay is the same, the UFC owns your signature again. As antitrust lawyer Eric Kramer put it, the UFC's contracts aren't just restrictive, they're engineered to control the entire industry. And now that control is being challenged in court through the $1.6 billion La v. UFC lawsuit, a case filed by former stars like Kung La, John Fitch, and Nate Quarry. If the UFC loses, the fallout could be catastrophic. Financial documents revealed in discovery show fighters receive just 18% of the UFC's total revenue, despite being the literal product being sold. Compare that to NFL players, approximately 48%, NBA players, 50% MLB players, approximately 54%, even WWE wrestlers, under Vince McMahon's notoriously tight control, earn a higher revenue share than UFC fighters. And yet, Dana White, worth over $500 million, once claimed fighter pay isn't an issue, while dozens of his own athletes begged publicly for fair pay, medical care, and sponsorship freedom. As former UFC lightweight champion Eddie Alvarez said bluntly, "We're not asking for the world. We're asking to be treated like professionals, not property."
The market. I just wanted to fight out my contract and renegotiate.
And that's not exaggeration, it's reality. Here's a real example that's now part of multiple depositions. A fighter signs a 6-fight UFC contract. After 4 fights, he wins the title. The UFC instantly triggers the Champions Clause, tacking on 3 extra fights without negotiation. Then he gets injured, sidelined for 12 months. When he recovers, the UFC refuses to book him for another 6. The result: his contract never expires. No fights, no money, no freedom, no career. It's legal limbo, and it's happening to real fighters right now. But here's where things get truly dangerous for the UFC. This class action lawsuit isn't just about financial compensation. It's demanding injunctive relief, meaning if the court rules in favor of the fighters, it could legally force the UFC to rewrite every contract in its system, abolish the Champions Clause, and open the door for fighters worldwide to sue for lost earnings. Under US antitrust law, damages can be tripled, meaning every fighter unfairly trapped since 2010 could be owed 3 times what they lost in potential income. According to early legal estimates, that adds up to a staggering $5 billion plus in potential liability. And now, the movement has a new high-profile ally, Aljamain Sterling, former UFC bantamweight champion. Sterling, once a loyal company man, has now stepped forward to back the fighters, calling the UFC's system modern-day indentured servitude. He's not just lending his voice, he's lending his influence. Because when one of the UFC's own former champions joins the rebellion, you know the walls are starting to crack. Aljamain Sterling is working closely with fighter advocates to investigate UFC contract manipulation and deliberate career stalling. While he hasn't officially joined the class action lawsuit, sources say his team submitted documents showing how the UFC extended his contract timeline without consent, allegedly to block him from entering free agency in time for the PFL superfight season. He's not alone. An anonymous top 15 welterweight told MMA Fighting Off Record that he was threatened with benching after refusing to resign a contract extension mid-deal. This is the harsh reality behind the cameras. For years, fighters were too afraid to speak up. The UFC controlled their pay, their platforms, and even their post-retirement careers, including Hall of Fame gigs and commentary roles. But now, with PFL offering massive guaranteed contracts, flexible deals, and no Champions Clause, that fear is finally breaking. The floodgates are opening. Dana White's response, predictably hostile. About the lawsuit, he said, "I just found out a lawsuit was filed against me yesterday. This guy went to federal prison for trying to extort me 5 years ago. Now he's back with a lawyer, also a convicted felon, trying to extort $10 million. He got nothing before, and he'll get nothing now. The court will dismiss this, and I'll be rid of these scumbags forever." Fast forward to 2025. Ngannou, Burgos, Santos, Diaz, Holland, Harrison, and dozens more are walking away, calling Dana White's bluff. If the courts rule in their favor, the UFC could see the Champions Clause eliminated, exclusive contracts rewritten, its monopoly power broken. This isn't just a lawsuit, it's a revolution. And the next chapter, the superfight era, the PFL's billion-dollar gamble on celebrity matchups, and a $300 million investment from SRJ Sports, and the Saudi Sovereign Wealth Fund's combat division the same. Investors who disrupted golf with live and bankroll mega boxing events like Fury vs. Usyk. This isn't a side project. This is a global takeover blueprint, and Dana White never saw it coming. The lawsuits, the media pressure, the exodus of fighters, none of it compares to the real money now challenging his empire. The UFC throne is in the crosshairs, and the fight for MMA dominance has officially begun. With Bellator now fully merged under the PFL banner, the promotion has instantly inherited over 200 fighters, 17 former champions, a global broadcast network, and established partnerships with Showtime, Channel 5, and DAZN. This isn't just competition anymore, this is a full-blown combat sports arms race. But what truly makes PFL dangerous isn't just its roster. They're not trying to be another UFC, they're building the next generation of combat sports entertainment, with fighters at the center. Here's what PFL is doing differently. Fighter equity options, ownership stakes in the company. Transparent seasonal structures with clear paths to million-dollar paydays, open sponsorship rights, no more forced Reebok or Venom gear, guaranteed minimum purses for top stars. Crossover clause, allowing fighters to box or participate in influencer bouts. And the brand new PFL PPV Superfight division. What's the Superfight division? According to co-founder Don Davis, it's a completely new vertical focusing on blockbuster celebrity-driven fights outside the tournament format. Think of it as MMA's Netflix original series, big budget, exclusive, headline-grabbing events designed to steal UFC pay-per-view dominance. And guess who's headlining the first wave? Francis Ngannou, a pairing designed to shock the MMA world and redefine the game. If you want, I can rewrite the next section covering the PFL's $300 million investment, global strategy, and the full financial war against the UFC, so your YouTube script stays consistent and cinematic. Do you want me to do that next?
Over. Fighters are severely undervalued. Promotions are making billions of dollars, and fighters are still making 10 grand, 20 grand, 30 grand. That's kind of bullshit.
And now, Nate Diaz, one of MMA's ultimate crossover stars. These aren't just purist fighters anymore. They sell to boxing fans, YouTube audiences, and casual sports viewers, and they're doing it without asking Dana White for permission. Here's the jaw-dropping part. Jake Paul's vision is working. When Paul joined PFL as a part owner and fighter, many, including Dana, laughed it off. Another clout stunt, they said. Another fake boxer, making noise. But in just 2 years, Jake signed a multi-year broadcast deal with DAZN for made his MMA debut official for 2025. Secured a $10 million purse to fight Nate Diaz in MMA. Helped PFL lock broadcast rights across Europe and Latin America. Jake isn't just fighting. He's a producer, promoter, and walking billboard for fighter freedom. And here's what's truly terrifying for UFC brass. PFL doesn't need Dana White. They don't need UFC talent. They're building new stars globally, from YouTube sensations to African phenoms, giving them the freedom to fight where and when they want. But what about the UFC? Surely they're too big to fail. Maybe not. Real cracks are forming. The antitrust case is moving to trial. Fighters may be forced to testify under oath. If they win, UFC could owe billions and be forced to rewrite every active contract. Stock volatility. Since Endeavor merged UFC with WWE to form TKO Group Holdings, investors are questioning long-term sustainability, especially after Vince McMahon's resignation and PR disasters. Fighter sentiment is shifting. For decades, fighters whispered complaints. Now, they're speaking out publicly. United, the moment that crystallized, Nate Diaz's viral PFL interview. Dana said he made me. Bro, I made this sport. I made you. Now, I'm doing me. You could feel the walls of Las Vegas shake that night. So, what does MMA look like now? A 22-year-old kickboxing phenom signs with PFL, not for money, but for guaranteed fights, sponsorship freedom, and a Netflix co-production deal. A retired UFC champion joins PFL's broadcast team, exposing backstage contract secrets live. The superfight division pulls in millions of PPV buys, not from hardcore fans, but casual viewers who never watched UFC. Dana White is dragged into court under oath, forced to explain why UFC contracts resemble indentured servitude. Meanwhile, Endeavor is losing billions. For UFC, sweating. For fighters, finally smiling. For fans, the wildest shift in MMA history. The gloves are off, the money is flowing, and fighters are fighting back. That's it for this deep dive. For more explosive content like this, smash that subscribe button, hit the bell, and check the cards on your screen for more videos. Don't forget to drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear from you. If you want, I can rewrite the entire UFC Gives PFL story as a single cohesive YouTube script with smooth transitions, hooks, and cliffhangers for maximum engagement.
I want to announce you that I'm officially partnering up with the PFL for the next step of my career.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. You read the title correctly. I've officially signed as an MMA fighter to the fastest growing sports league in the world. The PFL, baby.
I am officially a MMA fighter. I signed to the PFL league.
Yes.